Coming up, a Sad Styles production.
Hello and welcome. My name is Mikey Singer, signing on to the sign-off of Frameworth podcast for yet another week. It is the forum for all the stories you didn't know you wished you knew about the world of sports and sports marketing. I am joined in studio this week by nobody. It is just me, and it's not at the Frameworth headquarters. I'm recording this from home. My dad's doing his typical thing. President of Frameworth Sports Marketing, Brian Aaronworth, he's out for the weekend. He was actually just as of recording last night in Edmonton watching the hockey game. For those of you tracking my dad, there should be an app for that. He's all over the place all the time. A witness, depending on your perspective, the fortunate or unfortunate exit of the playoffs from the Edmonton Oilers, or the moving on of the Colorado Avalanche. So some news there, obviously, in the NHL, but we're not here to talk about sports necessarily, not in terms of the goings-on of the NHL, because we have bigger events to talk about this week. Obviously, if you're familiar, these Toronto Sport Card Memorabilia Expo just wrapped up last weekend. Our guest this week is the president and founder of MKEM, with experience in event management dating back, 20 years or so. If you've ever been to one of the major expos in Toronto, chances are you've seen his work. He recently wrapped up the largest ever Toronto Sport Card Memorabilia Expo, and we're here to find out everything that went down. To do that, we sit down this week with Mikey Singer. Mikey, how are you doing today?
Great. A little tired from running the show. It felt like, obviously there's a lot of lead time going up to it, but even just that last week going in, it felt like there was something going on. And as you said, it was the biggest show we've ever done.
Yes.
So it was a real undertaking, a lot of new clients, brand new hall. And if anyone has been to the Sport Card Memorabilia Expo before, it is a long-running show with a lot of people who feel very strongly about their spot in the show. Yes. So finding everyone a new spot in a new hall and making sure they're happy was a task unto itself.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, and I want to, in a little bit, get into sort of your history in the event space, because it's plentiful, and we'll get into that in a little bit about you. But because you've just touched on it, Mikey, you talk about, people and trying to keep them satisfied and all that. A lot of people might hear that and assume that what you're talking about are the guests who come to the Sport Card Expo. We had Steve Menzie on last week prior to the show, and he talks about how and this is not a shot to the people who go to the expo, but his primary concern and his primary customer are the people who open up the booths, who the dealers there who go to the show. And that's what you're talking about, right? Making sure that you're keeping them satisfied. With the change to the new hall, because I went, Frameworth had a booth there as well, booth 1620 to 1623. I don't know why I'm saying that now,
booth,
because beautiful booth. It was right by the cafeteria, which was fantastic. Hot dogs all day long, some fried chicken sandwiches, which was amazing. We loved the new space. It was easy to understand, easy to get a grasp of. What did you think about it, and what sort of response did you get from the dealers at the show?
For most of the dealers, they loved it. They thought it was a great space. And for the dealers, there's two things that are really important to them. Mm-hmm. The dealer-to-dealer interactions and sales. So I think a lot of people don't understand how much business is done prior to the show ever opening. Okay. Just between the dealers to themselves. And obviously the amount of people that we have in. And so we did have a really good turnout this year. You were there, you saw it. It was one of our best Fridays of all time. Mm-hmm. Throughout the weekend, we had a really great turnout in terms of the crowd. And for the most part, the dealers did really well. Now, depending on what kind of dealer you are, you may not have had as great a show as you've had in the past, and that might have been location, that might have been what you brought in. It might have been, you brought in a sport or a specific type of card that wasn't really hot right now. Mm-hmm. As you know, the market has shifted. It wasn't like we were in November where literally everything was up and it was all-time highs. People are a little bit more savvy. There's a lot of new people who've entered into the space, so they know a little, they've matured a little bit over the last 2 years. And when I say entered into the space, I mean during the pandemic, we had a big uptick. So a more savvy customer, people looking for deals, people, hunting out. They are armed with more information than ever. Not to get too minute into the attendee.
Minute is what we do here, actually. Yeah, and I want to ask you a question about that, because I noticed this as well. yes, the industry has expanded like twofold since the start of the pandemic. A lot of people thought it would go the other way, but it turns out collectibles in a recession are like razor blades and lipstick, like things that just do not go down in value. In fact, they increased in value so much so that the number of dealers had increased and the number of guests and customers, end user customers, collectors had increased as well. That created, in my mind, maybe you'll agree, maybe you won't, a chasm between the savvy and the novice. And I know of one situation where someone came to the booth wanting to buy one of Frameworth's mystery boxes, which we offer. It's a guaranteed signed jersey, signed photo, signed puck in every box. You just don't know which ones you're going to get. And before he did that, he wanted to see if he could go and sell. He had a whole box of cards to sell. Told me some of the stuff in it, some signed items, some of the with the little cutouts of the jersey material, some decent stuff. And I said to him, I said, you're here as a collector, but this is a business to a lot of people. Make sure you shop around. Make sure you get some quotes on prices. Don't just sell to the first person, the first booth you go to, because anyone is going to try to get the best price that they can. Like I said, it's a business. He leaves. 5 minutes later, he comes back. He says, man, I expected to get a lot more for those cards, but apparently the industry is really bad right now. And it's hard to sell these cards. So I only got $100 for them. And I'm like, you just got taken for, I didn't say this to him because, he's like, whatever, I made my money, this and that. But did you find that going around the show that there was a big difference between some of the newer people and older people? And how was that navigated for the attendance?
Well, I think for the incredible amount of new people who've joined the industry, they have much more information and savvy to their fingertips.
Right.
So things like eBay, sold comps, things like that, it's all available for them. Apps like Center Stage, who was at the show, will instantly scan a single and let you know all of the comps on eBay over the last little bit. So there's really quick ways to tell. So even if you're a novice at this, you can get a good sense if you want to do the research. The second part to the sales portion of it, because a lot of vendors are buying. And that was one of the first things, being in the industry for 20 years, working in a variety of different consumer and trade events. It's really, the vendors are selling. They're this is one of the few places and a couple other collectible style shows where vendors are actively buying collections and singles and things like that and working for deals. But what a seller can get on retail, so those eBay comps and things like that, you can expect to get 30% less from the retailer.
Right.
Understanding that, one, this market is highly volatile, so they're taking all the risks once they make the purchase. Two, they have overhead, right? They are running the store, they have to catalog the inventory, they have to maybe have that inventory or that investment sit on their shelf. I mean, it's no further than look at Pawn Shop or Pawn Stars or whatever.
Sure.
What he says is actually true. The whole show isn't true. It's all set up and everything like that. But some of his lines about they have overhead, they have staffing costs, everything like that. So a lot of individual people who come in to sell don't realize that. And if you could easily get those comp prices on eBay, you would have just done it yourself.
Exactly.
Right? There's other costs that are involved. There's time commitments and things like that. So there's things that people have to take into account. And in terms of, like I said, the savvy investor, usually those are the people who are coming in on the VIP night. Right? Those are the people who are willing to spend the extra money to come in 15 to 20 minutes before, understanding that there's a true value to that and having that one-on-one conversation to make those deals, make those buys. Because the vendors are there to sell as much as they're buying. I know I myself am shopping. I picked up a couple cards as per usual at these shows now. And I'm not afraid to haggle a little bit, right?
Of course. It's part of the game. That's absolutely part of the game there. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that attendees have to realize, right? Don't be insulted by any pricing that you see.
Right.
And don't be afraid to say, okay, I see that card is $3,500. Okay, I got 30. I only want to spend $3,200. I'm going to tell them I only have $3,200 in my pocket.
Yeah.
Right. And come in as if you are, willing to negotiate, because again, that's the sort of business that we're in with the volatile market. And I think that's always been the case with sports cards. It's less so with your company, given, what you guys do, the framing, the everything. You really put together custom pieces, where the cards, there's a lot more to track. As I said, you can go to Center Stage, you can go to market movers. You can go to eBay, sold. There's so many different ways to find out a ton of information on the card you're looking at, especially if it's, common or even like silvers and things like that. You can really get a lot of information at your fingertips, even if you are a novice.
I like that. I like that a lot. I mean, there's so much to touch on there. And one of the things that eventually I do want to talk about is the ways in which you had pivoted in the scope of COVID, going to a virtual expo and this and that. But one of the reasons I like to use that as a jumping off point is to touch on the ways in which the industry is changing. Everything you've just said there about, understanding the value of a card and asking around and using these apps and this and that, there's like a dark arts sometimes to card collecting. And I think that's what a lot of people like. I know some people, Ken Reed, for example, came by the booth, announcer obviously on Sportsnet, writer, author, et cetera. His credentials are a mile long, but he came by and he said, he's there for himself as a collector, and he kept commenting that too many booths these days are just like, they've got everything graded, they've got the price tickets, this and that. He wants to be searching through things to find a buried treasure somewhere. And I think as long as the waters are somewhat muddied, it gives that intrigue that you may come upon a diamond in the rough at any point in time. Now, you talk about these apps that allow you to scan a card and get a more broad understanding of what it sells for. And that's sort of the direction that the industry is heading with things like, hand in hand with things like a digital expo and a virtual expo and this and that. But what I love about the Toronto Sport Card Memorabilia Expo in the state that it's currently in is there is an element that embraces the growth, but there is also that feeling of like, you can really get in the weeds and try to find some rarities and haggle a little bit and everything's a little bit muddied and it's comfortable living in there. It's like putting on, as a lot of people at the expos wear, a nice pair of sweatpants. It's just like this nice little feeling. Where do you see then the Toronto Sport Card Memorabilia Expo or expos in general, where do you see them in 10 years? That hand-in-hand growth between technology advancements and trying to keep things traditional.
Well, I think there's always going to be the traditional sellers, the people who set up, they've got their showcases with all their graded and high-end stuff, and those are their glass showcases, and then they've got their $5, $10, $20 ungraded boxes where people can flip through complete sets. That's always going to be a part of it. And what we're seeing now is a huge increase. There was a ton of investment in the space. And you saw it this year. We had more corporate booths than we've ever had before. So I touched a little bit on some of those apps that we were talking about. We had eBay have the biggest, nicest booth they've ever had at the show. They're our title sponsor now. We had Whatnot come in a pretty decent way. We had Drip come in a pretty decent way. We had PWCC there in a big way. We had... CSG. God, that took a while to get out. PSA Canada.
There's a lot of acronyms to remember. It's no shot at any of these companies, but at a certain point, it's just a soup of letters, right?
It is, and what you saw there, Liquid Marketplace. Like, you had these real fun, interesting booths. Upper Deck always does a great booth. Their booth was fantastic this year.
Right.
That kind of stuff goes hand in hand with your mom and pop or dad and son. You see a lot of dad and son vendors.
Yep.
Like the older ones and now the new ones coming in. You got the 12-year-old son there with the 40-year-old dad who's got a table set up, and they're loving. Yep. Right, because their version of what a good show is far different than a show that, a place like yourself That's is out there and does this full time. So there's always going to be a need for that. There's always going to be room. The beautiful thing about the show itself is booths, although have gone up in price, they are still very reasonable to come in and spend for the weekend. Honestly. And what's great about the corporate booths is, Whatnot had a basketball game.
Sure.
And it was free and people were playing and they were having a good time. Liquid Marketplace did a bunch of giveaways. All of these add to the fun of the show. Card Plugs and Drip had just a giant party inside their big booth. Mint Ink is constantly blasting music. So the industry has changed as much as it has stayed the same with companies like BMW, Sports Cards still has like amazing vintage stuff. And they're still buying and dollies. So there's a nice mix of the new stuff always still going to have the old way of doing things. And everyone, I mean, the biggest thing is now everyone has cash apps and stuff like that too, right? Like, it's still cash, but I'll just send you PayPal, right? So, but it is, people aren't slowly embracing the change. And as you said, when we did the virtual, and I got to give kudos to Steve, the man is willing to take a risk.
Steve being Steve Menzie, our guest from last week,
and the owner of the Sport Card and Memorabilia Expo, and that includes taking a risk on hiring us. He came to my fantasy sports show. He thought what we did was really cool. That's why he brought me in originally to the show, was to add some of those elements, to add some of that corporate feel to it, which we have done. And with the stage and different things that we've done to upgrade the show overall. And, and then we, when it happened in the terms of the pandemic, instead of sitting back like a lot of shows did, he was like, okay, let's try this. We found the platform, which was Hopin, which are now, my company is a certified Hopin agency, and we work really closely with them.
One of, I think, 2 in Canada, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly, and they like us the best too.
That's of course. Well,
I'm
so
really good. I am really good friends with the other agency, and I love that one of the owners is my neighbor by like 4 houses. So
oh wow,
we're really close. We partnered on projects and stuff like that. We're more about, but we're just better. We're awesome.
In the infinite space of a virtual landscape, you just so happen to be side by side, physical distance. That's amazing. Let's use that, I think, a little bit to talk, because I said we want to get to know a little bit more about you, and we definitely do. And for the listener, selfishly, this is a podcast I've been very excited to record, because Mikey, you and I have, well, first of all, we both got the name Mikey. I mean, what are the chances? We've been working together closely since at least 2016 when Steve bought the Toronto Sport Card Memorabilia.
2018 was the first year.
2018 was the first year that...
And that's when you own the show, Mike. At that point, you own the show, Mike.
Yes. I took over the microphone, and I made sure that I constantly had it. That's when Frameworth managed the autograph pavilion entirely to ourselves. What an undertaking that was. It was intense. Steve mentioned in the last week, and you've touched on it as well, the shift from just a sales conference, essentially, like a sales expo, to an experiential expo. And you've talked about all the various ways in which some of the corporate partners and some of the booths have added to that feeling. But let's get into that then, what you brought to the table. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about MKEM, and how you first got involved with Steve Menzie in the Toronto Sport Card Memorabilia Expo.
So I've been in the events industry for really since I was 21. And so 22 years, and it started doing parties. Yeah. I started throwing parties when in my early 20s at different clubs around Toronto. And I did that until I was about 26, 27. I remember the last party I did was a New Year's Eve party, and some guy I had a ton of cash in my pocket. Not going to go right over it, but some guy tried to start a fight with me, and it was like, I think it was 20,000 or something like that.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, I am too old for this shit right now. So,
pulling the Danny Glover comment. Yeah.
Exactly, right? Like, this guy's fighting, the bouncers are kicking him out, and then I got my little sister there, who at the time was like 18, 19. She would have been 19 if she was in the party. Sure. But I was just like, this is it for me. So I transitioned out of the parties, and I started working at this little show called the Everything to Do with Sex Show. And I did that for 11 years, and I became a part owner in that event. We did that across Canada for 7 different cities, and even North America. We touched in the States for a little bit, unsuccessfully, but we did shoot over there. Sure. It was a
interesting
great show.
Choice of words for the Everything to Do with Sex show.
Right? It was honestly, it was an amazing event. It allowed me to be really creative. We had 7 different stages. It was really experiential. Really, it was a couples-driven event, so we catered to them. We would have date night ideas and things like that. So it showed me what we could do. And then when I sold out of that, I went on to start my own company. And the first thing that we did was the Fantasy Sports Show. So it was great event, really good. We didn't have the attendance that we were looking for, but we had great corporate partners. We had Yahoo, DraftKings, OLG, the Argos, Really fun, cool event. We had VR there when it was still really early in the space. So really cool, fun stuff to do. Just not enough attendees. But Steve had come to the show and he reached out to me in his super cool way, calm voice. He's like, I
of
like
course.
what you did, always calm.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'd be totally down to talk. So it was him and this other company that I basically started consulting right away for him and another video, EGLX.
Oh, right.
Which
Video games. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course I know. I know all about it. Yeah.
So, of course, like, it's video games and sports, but two things I'm really into, like transitioning from fantasy sports. So started with Steve, and then my mandate was to really, help with support on his customers. So people like his support customers, people like you. That first year I helped bring eBay in, and that was a start. It was a small little package, and then really support him on some of those aspects, and then updating the show. I brought in the stage for the first time. They had the riser before, but it wasn't really a stage. You see what we do now.
Of course.
So it was really that push to get more modern, more fun, newer kind of things into the show. We are always trying to be creative. We brought the games in one time. We did lounges. So Steve's always down to experiment and try new things to make the show better. And it's worked. One of the things that we were trying to do, as you said, like, it's a lot of sweatpants in the show. It was an older demographic when we first started coming in. So what we've really tried to do is make it more fun and inviting for more families and younger people to come. And it's not just us, but like you having the spinning wheel for $50, like, that's awesome. I was sad I didn't get to do it. It's one of my favorite things to do at the show.
The spinning wheel, if the listener isn't aware, it's a randomized. You pay $50 to spin the wheel. You're guaranteed a signed photo. There's also a $60 puck version. You don't know who you're going to get, but you're going to land on a signed photo or puck and take that home. Could be Sidney Crosby, or could be a Hall of Famer. You never know.
You never know, but it's always fun. It's always
and
fun.
Loud. We purposely make it loud. Yeah.
And I'll have to say, so when we first did the very first Sport Card and Memorabilia Expo virtual, Frameworth, again, was very innovative. You had brought both those things to the virtual component, and I know I bought $3 on there.
It's great. Great.
It was awesome.
I'll spin that for you anytime. We did some auctions as well. That was a very exciting thing to be a part of. And all credit to you, Mikey, because it would have been very easy in the time of COVID to say, look, the world's on pause. We're going to be on pause. We'll see you guys later. Talking to Steve last week about what that would have meant to the hundreds of booths and the all the attendees and everything, to not allow them to do that twice, at least once a year, would have been massive. That's socially, professionally, it means so much to all these companies who essentially, a lot of them do make their living at these events. It was massively important. When you told us you were going to be setting up a virtual expo, we wanted to be part of it as well. And we did recognize that, we sort of share that vision between yourself and Steve, that it isn't just about buying and selling. If you want to go there and just buy and sell, that totally works. But I think the whole venue benefits from having a little bit more life pumped into it, and that virtual expo is no different. What was that like? You talk about partnering with Hopin as a way to sort of bolster the ability to put on a virtual expo. Stress level and just figuring things out. How much time did you have, and what did that do to your longevity in terms of your lifespan?
I've definitely, over the course of the 2 years, cut off a lot of my lifespan due to stress. But with Steve's show, I think we had 3 months from when he said this is a go. Yeah. And one of the things that really pushed it was eBay coming in. That was the first time that eBay came on as a title sponsor. So one of the first things I did was I worked with Steve really closely with our partners from eBay, and they were really into the idea, and that really helped push it forward.
That's big.
The next big hurdle was training a very analog crowd
Yes.
using
Yes.
how to do digital. And special shout outs to Dave Rosen and Neil Bernstein, who took the time to get comfortable with the platform and put their best foot forward. Right. And there was a lot, and we did a lot of training demos. We did a lot. It was a learning process for me and my team, because the more we trained, the better we got, and people were trying and doing different things. They were being creative. It was really fun. It was an exciting time. And then the content piece of things was amazing. We had better content at the virtual events than we've ever had. We would get experts from any field we wanted. We had professional graders on there. We had special guests. Austin Matthews stopped by. Like, that just doesn't happen live because it's really hard to get him and his time, right?
Exactly.
So it was cool. Like, that was super stressful. I have the Leafs, his agent, and the Leafs, like, public relations person calling me while I'm running the show. And I'm like, I promise you, we're going to make this simple. We'll make it easy. Don't worry. So it was really good. And he was really cool about it. And again, like, that content was really good. Obviously, as we go back to in person, we even did a full stream last time. And we'll likely be, we're always capturing the content that we do on the stage now in person. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start streaming again.
I was curious about that. I mean, I almost a little bit surprised, because you guys did such a good job building that virtual platform. And it seems like as an asset, it's there. You've a proof of concept, like you mentioned. When Steve first announced to all the dealers that you guys were going to be moving to a virtual platform, my first thought was, I know some of these people, and I cannot imagine they're going to be willing to set up a webcam, microphone, all that stuff. But they all did. You guys did a phenomenal job of training them. Now they're there. Now they've bought in. I did sort of expect to see a continuation of that and some streaming. And granted, you have your own new slew of issues, especially in the November show, dealing with COVID screening and that sort of thing. This feels like, getting your bearings. This was sort of the first normal, quote unquote, normal expo again, but now you're dealing with a new venue and new size and more people. Do you guys envision a situation in which the Q&As, which we'll touch on in a bit, the autograph signings, live cameras, all that sort of stuff, are you constantly going to have this outreach to a virtual audience as well? Is that in the cards?
Yes. That is 100%. It is important. It is something that is going to be addressed moving forward. The content we're doing on the stage is getting better every single time. The Q&As, the panels, the interviews, the kids breaks that are going on. We can reach a bigger audience, right? We are the national show. We are the largest Canadian show by a wide margin. There's a lot of people who would like to see what's going on.
Yep.
And we can even bring in, because we have the video wall and different things that we can do, we can really bring in guests. So we're going to be doing more of that. So expect that in November. One of the reasons we didn't do it this year is because although we were back to normal in Toronto, obviously the new venue, but Steve also a month ago started the first Edmonton Sport Card and Memorabilia Expo, which my team and himself were scrambling to do. And prior to that, we also had the Strongsville Sport Card Show, which was super cool event. First time we've ever been a part of it, but all of that was compressed into one small period of time.
Right.
I remember when he decided, it was again showing Steve willing to take risks and really pushing the envelope. We went to a show in Montreal in January, and that was the impetus for the idea. And then shortly after, we were heading in March to, or end of March, early April to Thing.
Now, I got a question, because you just mentioned, 3 or 4 shows, and it doesn't seem like there was any indication given that your team is thinking of slowing down. We are 2 days as of recording removed from the Expo. Is there a break, or are you constantly working on the next Expo? Do you get a window where you can kind of just relax, or no?
In July, we'll have time. Myself and my team will each take some time, but we have, right now, we're running an event for a doctor's conference, some of my teammates. We're working on a very complicated event for Amazon Alexa, which will involve 25,000 virtual attendees.
Wow.
And that happens in July. And then we've got August. We don't have anything, but I'm praying nothing. It's one of the
Right.
few times in my life that I'm praying we don't get a show. Right. So it used to be that the show season was, honestly, like September till, call it April, May. But now it's really extended, and with what we're doing virtually, and because we've become such an industry leader, a lot of people come to us. We've been far busier than before. But I myself am taking 2 weeks off in July. I'm going to a cottage in Prince Edward County, and I will not be bringing my computer.
Well earned, well deserved. For those of you who take part in these expos or who have been, everything runs very smoothly. Which is amazing. Anytime you get thousands of people in a single space, and that's owing to you and your team. It's fascinating to see what you do. Every time I see you've got something on the go. It's good to know that you're able to take these breaks. But I'm curious. This is all coming, sort of at the end of a pandemic where we've all been, depending on who you are, ending or slowing down of a pandemic, and we've all been sort of relegated inside for the past 2 years. Is this busyness, is this constant checking in on new events related to that? Is it just people making up for lost time, or do you foresee it being like this for the rest of eternity, or at least until you're ready to retire?
Well, I hope it's like this till the time I'm ready to retire. I hope we continuously have clients, and we have some really good core stable clients. Allstate is a great client of ours. Steve is our number one client. I tell him that all the time.
Yeah.
He's our best looking client. He knows that.
He is, man. He's marathon runner, triathlon runner. He if you weren't listening to the last episode on YouTube or watching on YouTube, check it out. He's a handsome devil. Can't take that away from him.
He is, as you say, he's in great shape. So no, he's awesome. We've got some really, really good, solid core clients, and then we get new clients all the time. Our partnership with eBay, with Hopin, really does great stuff for us. So we're hoping to grow, actually. And for me, I'll be able to take more time. We'll just add more staff, right? So we happen to have amazing team leads, amazing staff members. You've gotten the chance to interact with them. I can't say enough great stuff. The reason the show feels so seamless, when there are emergencies, they're great problem solvers, right? They're, as you know, with guests and connecting guests with fans, sometimes stuff comes up for the guests. They can't arrive on time. Their flight got canceled. Something happens. Windows are so tight. And with the changes and with the pandemic and coming out of it, we had at least a few guests who had to move, and we had to move around and had to be creative. That's why you saw, Kevin Stevens, for example, we didn't have a slot available when he was able to finally get in.
Right.
And so we just did the signings on the stage, and that presented a few more problems, but we just activated the team to make sure it was a great experience for each of the guests. The
best thing you can do, well, I'll say it this way, actually. The worst thing you can do is prepare so much that you believe nothing is going to go wrong. Because, we talk about as much you have to be prepared for things to not go right. We talked last week about literally, and you were there as well a couple of years back, the weather getting so bad in Toronto that the roof of the building blew off. I mean, that's not something that's in your agenda. Prepare for the roof blowing off of a hall. What are you going to do to that? Were there any things like that? And you mentioned Kevin Stevens arriving at a time when there was no space. Any fires that you had to put out? Not literal fires, or maybe this year that maybe we weren't privy to.
Yeah, there's always continually little stuff, right? Internet problems, issues with locations. We had to tweak the stage seating. Things look different, obviously, on a floor plan versus when you're actually in the facility. So
for sure,
little things that came up, a lot of little things on the Friday. And our goal is, if you didn't notice them, then we're doing our job. And if the 100%. Attendees don't notice them, we're doing our job. And the key thing is, when anyone was late or something was happening, we let all of the fans know right away.
Yeah.
Communication is key. We try to communicate everything. We try to make sure that they know what's going on. And for the most part, we just want to make sure, those fans are paying good money to have that experience with the athletes. So just want to make it a great experience. And sometimes it's the athlete, sometimes, it's us, but for the most part, they were awesome this year.
Yeah, everything runs smooth. I mean, it runs smoothly because you're there to keep it on course. And it's a good way to put it. If no one notices the issues going on, then you're doing a good job. And we've talked about you and what you do for the Expo quite a bit, but I want to kind of draw our listeners' attention to this fact. Last week when we had Steve Menzie on, I asked him what his history with collecting was, and he said non-existent, essentially. When I saw you at the Expo, Mikey, we were talking about how busy you were and what you had to do, and you said, yeah, I've got a lot on the go, but tomorrow is going to be my day to walk the show floor. And what I do really appreciate, not that it's necessary when you're running an expo, but I do appreciate the fact that you have an affinity towards these things, that you do like collecting. So give us a little bit about your history with collecting. What is it you're looking for? What industries, and maybe a couple pieces in your collection that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, I'll pull up probably like a couple things that I even in fact grabbed at the show or from another show right before it. But so I was a collector when I was 11, 12, 13 to 14.
Right.
Collected heavily, obviously saw the market crash, lived through that, saw my local card shop close. Like the only reason I stopped going to my local card shop is because it closed and they all disappeared. Right. So I would have still collected. I loved Garbage Pail Kids, loved basketball back then. I really collected a ton of Ken Griffey Jr. I still have like a big personal collection of Ken Griffey Jr. stuff. A lot of his rookies, and then got into buying them again. I graded a bunch of them, tried to get a Gem Mint 10, and didn't get any. Bought some more raw 1989 Upper Deck.
Try again, baby.
Try again. I remember when I, at $40 when I was 13, I was like all the money in the world I had, and I used that to buy, the raw one, and I wish I'd bought 100 more, right? You look back to it.
If only you knew, yeah.
Right? So I kept a lot of that stuff. I collected a bit of comics and things like that too. Obviously phased out when I really discovered women and in a hard way. And then
unfortunately, I discovered women at one point. They didn't discover me, so I was left to my collecting. Yeah.
Oh, believe me, I used all of my. That's why I discovered women and needed to use all of my mental capacity to try to get them to talk to me. So
exactly, yeah.
And then again, I started dabbling as soon as I started working. I had actually come to the card show and bought a couple things prior to working with Steve, and then when I started working with Steve, obviously you're surrounded by it. Sure. And slowly but surely, more and more, I was buying more and more things. I was more interested in what was happening. Breakers, boxes, packs. I also had money now. It's a totally different ballgame. Yes. I have my own money, so I was able to spend on certain things that I really wanted. So when the pandemic hit, by that time, I was already on eBay actively looking. And if it was a chart, you would see my purchases just go in a direct line like that as I became more comfortable. And now I have a pretty decent, you can even see right behind me those are all boxes full of graded cards.
There you go. Yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see there's a nice little display behind Mikey over there. There's some Star Wars stuff on there. You got some signed footballs, some boxes of cards. It runs the gamut. Let me ask you this. If you were to take your entire collection and you're going to split it dollar value between sports and comics, video games, pop culture, that sort of thing, where does it go out percentage-wise for each one?
Well, I can tell you probably my most expensive thing that I own is the Gretzky PSA 7 that I bought. So that's the most thing and I made Steve split it with me because I was too scared of my wife to buy it alone.
That's fantastic. The OPC, one of the most famous PSA cards 7. In the game these days. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a solid investment and I wanted it. Honestly, I just wanted it.
Are you willing to share how much you had to spend for it?
Nope. No,
that's
way,
fair.
Because God forbid she listens for whatever reason, I'll be dead. But I think we got a good deal on it, right? Again, it's all relative, but it was money I could afford to spend, and I wanted it really bad, and so as long as Steve was willing to split it with me, which I pressured him into doing, we now own a beautiful, very sharp PSA 7, and it is a really good-looking card. I scooped this up again. This one was $100. Not too expensive, but it's an iconic card, something I wanted to own. It's a PSA 8. Is that
LeBron and Kobe 2008 tops?
Yes, it is. So, again, not everything has to be super expensive. And then above me, actually, if I tilt this up a little bit, you can see 3 first issues, first prints of different comic
Is
books.
that Invincible, Daredevil, and what's the other one?
It is
there?
Invincible, the Ultimate first appearance of Miles Morales, first print, and The Boys first print.
And The Boys. Okay, it's a little blurry, so I couldn't tell. But Invincible, hey, this is completely out of left field if you're listening to this. But if you have any interest in comic book TV shows or comic books in general, Invincible, what a fantastic. That's Robert Kirkman, I think, responsible for the Walking Dead as well.
It is awesome. Invincible is awesome, and it's an awesome comic book. It's a really, really cool comic book. It's a really, really cool, and it's an amazing Amazon Prime show. Both of those, both the Boys too, which is I've just watched the first 3 episodes of The Boys. Now that yesterday I took off to sort of unwind a little bit, watch a little bit of senseless violence.
Yes. On TV, thankfully. We're not.
Yes. So again, I love football. You know, we had Thurman Thomas come to the show. I rarely get autographs from these players anymore. I did get a bunch of Leafs at one point to sign a stick for me, but rarely get autographs. But when Thurman Thomas came in, I just waited until everyone else was done and then snuck in there at the end with my ticket and got him to sign a mini helmet. So stuff like that, stuff that I'm really I really into. And as you said, I've got these actually I got all from Venice Beach. I specifically, there's a store in Venice that sells them. They're all made of scrap metal. And
those are the Star Wars figurines?
Yeah, the big Star Wars metal figurines. And man, they are so heavy. I remember walking around Venice with them in my backpack and just sweating. And I'm like, this is totally worth it.
It ain't heavy, it's my passion.
Exactly.
There's a remix of the song. Now, you talk about getting on stage to get something signed. Let's talk about you being on stage in a somewhat different capacity. Steve and yourself talk about changing the expos to make them more experiential. And part of that is running the Autograph Pavilion, which Frameworth did way back in 2018. We're not as heavily involved in that anymore. That now being handled by, I believe, Kojo and Sports Authentics. Fanatics for a while was involved in that too.
And Molly, we bring in
MAB, yep.
And that's the thing. Now it's really owned by the show, and we invite different vendors to come in. And obviously Kojo and Sports Authentics are big parts of that, but we do have other players who come in as well.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe someday Frameworth will get back involved in that. I know my dad's been talking about that, and I know honestly, it's worth considering. As much as it was, it gave me a bunch of gray hairs. It was a lot of fun to do. But that's not the only way that you're involved. We talked about the Q&A in the November show. You and I had been talking prior to some of the Q&As started. There was one planned for Shane Corson and Darcy Tucker. And you kind of came by the booth and you said, hey, what are you doing later today? And I said, well, I'm managing the booth, I assume. But I love talking to people. I love interviews. You know that. I've got the podcast. So I ended up coming on stage to run a couple of those Q&As. This year wasn't quite the same, Mikey. You found yourself in charge of the Q&As. How did that go? Is that something you have a lot of experience doing? Is it something you want to keep doing?
Well, first, let me tell you how we got there. So it's your own fault because you weren't there Sunday last year. And as you know, so if people don't know this, but I actually am Mikey's biggest fan on Instagram. I think everything he does is hilarious. Like it's me.
Thank you.
It's me posting in all the comments, loving everything he does. As for the talk, so I had invited you to do all the interviews last year, and then on Sunday, I had invited you to come back and do the rest of them, and you weren't available, so I had to do some quick ones. And Steve's like, "Oh, you're good at this." I'm like, "Okay, you're fine. I see what you're doing here. You're tossing another job on me." So
Thank you, but also I know what you're doing to me right now. Yeah,
exactly. And then this year coming in, we were unsure, and you said, I'd rather you just do it. You're already there. You can handle it. So I did do a bunch of them this year. It was really fun. I have a great time. And my team will tell you, I love to hear myself talk. So getting me on stage is definitely something I have fun doing. I always get nervous beforehand, but then once I'm in it, I really
Everyone
have a good
does.
time.
Everyone does. Yeah. I get nervous before recording podcasts and I'm at home, like that's, but I think that's the sign that you're still ready and you're on your toes a little bit, right? It's kind of necessary.
You care. right? Like I care how it comes across. I care what happens. Like I'm writing notes. Funny story. I thought I was supposed to interview Bernie Perron, but then they sent me Ernie Witt. So I had done 30 minutes of prep for Bernie Perron, and I had like some great questions and really good stuff. And then Ernie Witt came up on stage, and we had already prepped all the Bernie Perron like clips in the background, so I had to rush down and get that turned off and stuff.
Wow.
But you just roll with
that's literally a nightmare of mine. I have bad dreams about that happening.
It happened, and honestly, I went back into the memory bank and I watched a ton of Jays growing up. A ton of Jays. So I watched most of his career, and we talked, and he was wicked. The best part about like an interview is if you have a really good interviewee. Yes. Him having experience on TV and being a coach, like he was a great speaker. That went really well. So embarrassed. Apologized to him afterwards for the mess up, but he was so gracious and cool about it. I think my favorite interview this weekend, either between Pete Mahovlich, who was he had me laughing before we got up. Like he was
amazing.
He's a riot. Like he's really cool. I can just imagine what that guy was like as a player. He must have been awesome.
Yeah.
to be on a team with. And that's what's wicked, right? Like when you get to interview these guys and talk to them a little bit before you go on stage, you get a sense of them, a little bit of sense. So that was cool. And Brianne Jenner, she was really cool, and she was ripped. I'm like, I better not ask the wrong question, because if this girl hits me, I'm going to be out cold.
I tell you, look, you're trying to make the Sport Card Expo more experiential. What better experience than to watch a full-blown fight take place on stage?
I should have asked her for an arm wrestle. She would have just slammed me through the table like that. Her arms were ripped. And she was really cool too. She was really good. She was really gracious. I was a second late coming up because I was trying to eat lunch before. And then I had to do I'm going to smile, but you have to tell me if there's anything in my teeth before we go out there. And she was really cool. It was awesome. And the guests, like the guests were really cool. I had, my fan group was the 60 plus men who were sitting in the audience watching. They're like, "You're really good." I'm like, "Listen, I need you to know that this means the world to me." The three of you.
People do not understand how much that means when you have the one or two people reaching out.
It was wicked. It was awesome. It was the best feeling, and I had the best time. So. There's a lot of elements of the show that feel like work. That one feels like fun, and I look forward to doing it more and doing some more panels and things like that. I have a list of influencers from the industry. I watch. One of the things I do is I watch a ton of content about the industry.
Right.
What are the content producers saying? What are they talking about? What's something that some of the drama in the industry? What's everyone looking forward? There's a ton of stuff going on in this industry right now, right? Like with the changing of licenses, with the massive investments that have happened, just in the grading space alone, we've seen billions of dollars poured in. It's crazy.
It's massive, and it's going to keep changing, just like the Toronto Sport Card Memorabilia Expo is going to keep changing. We're running a little bit low on time, but I'm curious, Mikey, can you let us in a little bit and tell us what changes you have planned for the upcoming Expo? Obviously, it happens twice a year. I believe it'll be November. This coming November, there'll be another one. Do you have anything specific in mind that you want to bring to the table, or even if it's a pipe dream?
Yeah, I think you're going to see more content influencers at the event. So you're going to see more of the people that you see on YouTube, some of your favorite guests. So that's going to be coming into the show and onto the stage. The second part is we're going to try to do some more interactive fan experiences, right? Cool. Whether that's, when we had Joe Montana come in and throw the football and things like that. So we're going to work closely with our providers, like the agents of these people, and really try to do more of that, because I think those moments, those core memories that people get created are wicked stuff, like more so than just the pictures and things like that. And then finally, you're going to see more creative booths, bigger, more interactive booths come into the show, and we're probably going to be in a different hall again, because that's just the nature of the world right now.
Sure.
So it'll be interesting all over again.
It changes again and again and again, but I know that you guys are going to make great decisions on wherever it is that we end up. You mentioned the Joe Montana thing. That was fantastic. That was when Frameworth was still involved. We did sort of a tandem signing with Molly at MAB, and we had him actually throwing a pass, taking a picture of you catching the pass. And that was one thing, my dad's worked in this industry a long time, And I never would have expected him to like fully take part in a signing or an event like that. But he's like, I got to catch this pass from Joe Montana. Are you kidding me? It was great. It was great.
Cool, right? Like, and we set up that green carpet. That was one of the first things I was all about. I think the more we can do things like that, right? Like, just like you said, your dad, he deals with these guys all the time. And he can get any autograph he ever really wanted.
Right.
But you cannot always get a chance to catch a ball from Joe Montana.
Right.
Right? Like, that's something super cool.
It is super cool, and hopefully we can think of some new creative things like that to do. I think that's important. Let's leave off with one question, Mike. I'm always interested in things like this. You've walked the show a long time, several years. You've been involved in tons of different shows as well. Is there one item that you can think of that you've seen at the show that stuck in your head as the coolest thing that you've seen, or the most valuable, something that you think of when you're not on the show floor?
I think I'm always looking at, for me, it's the vintage cards that always strike me. I love, in one of the shows that I was at, I saw the Honus Wagner, like a T206 Honus Wagner.
Really?
Yeah. And that was really, really cool. That really, like, and I've seen some cool, and then also because of the show, I've seen some cool personal collections. So I've seen a couple really, really cool, like a really cool Luka, and I'm a big fan of Luka Doncic. So I saw a really cool 2 of 3 National Treasures Luka patch auto with the D inside some guy's personal collection. We actually helped get it graded for him, and I would have never had that opportunity to do so or been a part of that if I didn't know Steve.
I like that a lot, especially because, so much of collecting is experiential collecting. That's the word of the day, it seems, but not just the experience of catching a pass from Joe Montana, the experience of being in a space where you can be around so much of this valuable memorabilia, because I've always thought memorabilia is a way to sort of make physical the memories that we have about sports and experiences and things like that. And even just seeing those pieces of memorabilia are significant and important, even though you don't own them. It's just cool to have witnessed it. Mikey, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you want to take a well-deserved break after the weekend at the Toronto Sport Card Memorabilia Expo. Mikey Singer, president, obviously, of MKEM. Is there anything else you want to put people on towards, send people towards a website or anything like that?
Sportcardexpo.com. Check it out. We're always putting up new stuff. We're going to be working on the app this year to really get more interaction and again, stream some stuff into it. Do more for our audience, making it more accessible for everyone to be a part of. And then me and Steve break boxes. Every once in a while, you can go to the YouTube channel and see us. It's a random time, at a random day, at a random moment. But check out the YouTube channel, and you might see me and Steve break some boxes, which is pretty hilarious.
Amazing. And the name of the YouTube channel? Sport Card Expo?
Sport Card Expo.
Perfect. There you go. Well, Mikey, thanks once again for joining us. I had an absolute blast. I love getting into the weeds and talking about collectibles. We have athletes and agents and this and that on the show all the time. And of course, I enjoy talking to them. But I think our listeners really do love to hear some insight from people like yourselves who are not only those facilitating these sorts of expos, but also are collectors yourself. So thank you so much for joining us. For Mikey Singer, president at MKEM, myself, Mikey Aaronworth, host of the Sign Off podcast. This is us signing off. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we made it to the end of yet another episode. Thanks again so much for joining us. You can find videos of all of our episodes on YouTube by searching the Sign Off Podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter at Frameworth Sport or Instagram at Frameworth Sports. And hey, if you're not sick of me yet, you can find me on Twitter over at Retrograde Mikey, or you can always find me embarrassing myself over on Instagram at Aaronworth. The Sign Off is a proud product of Fadoo Productions and Sad Styles Productions. Executive producers, Mikey Aaronworth and Andrew Bascom. Until next week, this is Mikey Aaronworth, signing off.
Furnished by Sad Styles Productions.
Get into it!